Hi there, I'm Savannah Mextra with Mannor Law Group, welcoming you to another webinar Wednesday with esteemed elder law and estate planning attorney, Robert Mannor. This week, attorney Bob Mannor will be discussing a common concern among those with older parents, memory loss and finances. When is it appropriate for the kids to step in, and how can you be sure to help in a way that doesn't put your parents or your own assets at risk? Stay tuned to learn more. Now, before I pass the mic to Bob, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. First, note that even though Bob is an attorney, today's webinar will not give specific legal advice. If you have a question about your unique situation, please contact us after the webinar. If you have a general question during today's presentation, please use the chat box. We will save time to review questions during the webinar. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we'll contact you after the presentation. Lastly, note that today's presentation will be recorded and the replay will be sent out tomorrow so that you can share it with family, friends, or anyone who you think could benefit from hearing this information. Now, why should you listen to what the folks at Mannor Law Group have to say? We are a nationally recognized and respected elder law and estate planning firm. All three of our attorneys are accredited by the Veterans Administration to assist veterans with claims and appeals. Attorney Bob Mannor is nationally board certified as an elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation. He's one of only 19 attorneys in Michigan to achieve this designation. Bob is also a leader among elder law attorneys in Michigan. He is currently chair-elect of the State Bar of Michigan Elder Law and Disability Rights Section and past president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys Michigan chapter. And of course, my favorite reason, Mannor Law Group has been honored by readers of our local paper as the best or favorite law firm for the last 8 years in a row. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome attorney Bob Mannor.
Hi, folks. This is such an important question that we're going to address today. And the thing about this is that it is a tough question, right? A lot of times this is very much a struggle for families and for kids. I remember a time, I'll just tell you a quick story. At some point, a lot of my siblings worked at my law firm, and at one point, my brother and I were having a discussion about a client where the family, we gave advice to the family that they need to take some measures to make sure that their father was not driving anymore, that there had been some circumstances. And so we gave them some tips and some process and some procedures to help them through that process. And I turned to my brother and I said, you know, there will probably come a time when we're going to have to address this with our dad. And he looked at me and kind of snickered a little bit, and he said, okay, Bob, you do that, because I'm not touching that one. And this is something that we do every day. And I realize how easy it is for us to give advice and, you know, tell families that they need to step in, and how hard it is to actually do it. It is extremely difficult. And so we're going to talk about this from the standpoint of why it's so important, why we have to think about it, when, how, all of those things. And so the key on this is there does come a time in many people's lives where it's really important to involve other trustworthy, loving family members. And often that's going to be the kids, obviously, right? That's what it usually is that it's the children that need to step up and get involved in mom and dad's finances in particular, and other things too, but particularly the most difficult sometimes is finances. So why is it important? And so let's think about this from the standpoint of an older person. Well, the first thing is that as time goes by, why is it that people seem to target older people with financial scams and financial things? And why is it that we are worried about this? What is it, what makes it about aging, even without dementia, even without memory issues? And we're going to talk about that because that's a big part of this. But why is it that this is something that we have to at least keep an eye on and be aware of any red flags, that maybe it is time to have that conversation, to sit down, to meet as a family, and or just to make it really casual. You know, there's different ways to approach this. And the first thing I want to mention is kind of the new technology. Now, You know, some folks are really good on new technology. My dad worked with computers all of his life and enjoys working with computers. And so you would think that having been sort of an early adopter of technology, even my dad's 91 years old, and so he was an early adopter of using computers, and that was an active part of his job through General Motors, and so that he was unusual in that regard. And so, but even in a situation like that, where somebody through their life has been technology savvy, things change so fast now, and we don't necessarily always recognize it, but it is, you know, an issue. And so sometimes as we get up into those older ages, the technology might not be all as comfortable for us. And so it's a way that sometimes we can have people take advantage of us, or that we're just not using those resources to make things simpler. One of the next things is sort of changes in culture, and I want to talk about this on a whole variety of factors of why changing in culture might be a reason why the kids need to kind of step up and put their nose in where people have always told them their whole life that you shouldn't put your nose in. This is private, finances are private, you don't need to be involved in your parents' finances. And there's that worry and that danger that you're going to get criticized because people think you're just being greedy. No, you're not being greedy. You're trying to, you know, ideally, if you're being greedy, then get out of this presentation. I'm just not interested. If you're being greedy and you're trying to make sure that you get their money, then I have no interest in talking to you. That's not what this is about. And for most of the people that come to see us, the vast majority of people that come to see us, if they're worried about this and thinking about how and whether to step in and be involved in their parents' finance, it's because they care, because they're concerned. And so my advice is that we should start that process sooner, before we think we need to. I say that on a lot of different levels. When I'm dealing with older folks, I say, you know what? It's really important to plan before we think we need to. It's really important to have involve the kids before we think we need to. It's really important to get help, say like home help or assistance with care or managing our medicines or things like that, before we think we need to. A lot of the clients that I have end up in nursing homes for the rest of their life because they waited too long to accept help, because they were still juggling their laundry, going down to on the dark staircase to the basement and juggling laundry baskets, because they didn't, you know, weren't interested in getting help or asking for assistance or setting up the house in such a way that they don't have to get on a step ladder to get to the highest shelf and all these types of things. These are the types of things that I think that we should accept help, ask for help before we think we need to. And that's tough. I get that. That's particularly tough for older generations because they, you know, for example, what they call the greatest generation, they sometimes are, you know, what they're known for being self-sufficient, and definitely even, you know, beyond that, there's certainly you know, a lot of that. And the idea of it is, look, for everybody's sake, for their own sake, for your sake, for the kids' sake, for making sure that we don't end up in a nursing home for the rest of our life, it is important to step in before it gets too late. Okay, so the changes in culture, a couple of aspects that I want to kind of talk about that. One is the kind of reliance on the way that people interacted in years past and what the expectation was. So, for example, if you were going to go to, you know, if there was a advisor, a financial advisor, or a mechanic, or somebody like that that went to your church, or at least said that they, you know, were coming from your church or things like that, that might be something that you say, okay, well, I guess we can just rely on them. But there's a lot of folks out there now that will use those ends. They kind of rely on certain cultural norms that would, so you say, oh, you can trust me because I came from your church. I'll have an example of one that called my dad, and they said, and he picked up on this. He was real sharp on this, but they said, "Oh, we're from your." He had just did a thing on with his vehicle, and he said, "Oh, we're from." Oops, I think I lost my camera here. Hopefully, I'm not having internet issues here today. But he said, the caller said, "Oh, we're to talk about your car repair," and he had just gotten his car repaired. And so it really, and he played into it. He says, like, "Oh, is this about when I just took it in last week?" And he's like, "Yes, that's absolutely what it is." And they really kind of played on that. And it went pretty far along before, he called me and we got involved, and we said, "Okay, no, this was somebody just kind of playing on those expectations." And so just because somebody says they came from your church or that they worked with your neighbor or things like that, people are using those kind of things to build trust when there's not actually that trust there. They might not even know your neighbors. They might not know your church, but that is something that in generations past, it was very important that we get, we say, "Oh, well, I want to work with those folks at my church." Well, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but people are using those types of things to try to build trust, even though they may or may not be true. And the second part of that is sometimes there's people at your church that are not, that they're there to sell. They're there to become your financial advisor, to sell annuities, to have you put money into something that's probably not in your best interest. And they're there, and they know how to pretend that they're active in the church and things like that. So just something to think about and be aware of if your parents are involved in this. It's really kind of not a bad idea to say, "Hey, Dad, who are you using? How do you have things set up?" The second thing is, although, parents are rightly private, and there's no reason that they shouldn't be private, there is a different sort of cultural shift, especially for older generations, where folks that were raised by parents that went through the Depression, or they were raised by parents whose grandparents went through the Depression, or whatever it is, there was this understanding and expectation that you cannot put all your eggs in one basket. And what that meant to them is they might have bank accounts over here and bank accounts over here and bank accounts over here, and they have some money at this financial company, and they have some money at this annuity company, and some money at this life insurance company. And it gets very, very hard to keep track of as they get older. And so sometimes I met with folks, and they are completely sharp. They know exactly where each of their 70 different accounts is. I can go and I can ask them these questions, and they can tell me exactly where each of their 70 accounts is. What happens if they die? Because a lot of times that's going to be extremely difficult for the kids to sort through. Because a couple things. Number one, the kids aren't used to having 70 different accounts to keep track of. Secondly, some of it may be all up in that head, that really, clear that they knew where everything was and what they had and why they did it and all of these other things. But comes a time where that's really going to be difficult, because any of us can die at any time. And if somebody's expected to take over and they don't have that, or even if it is organized for them, it might not be organized. I have lots of folks that are extremely organized, and they have these charts and they have these handwritten notes and everything else. I'll tell you what, it's really hard to interpret that without their instructions, without, they can hand me their notebook paper worth of notes, or even their spreadsheet that they did on their computer. And without them explaining it to me, it's very difficult. And I do this for a living. Imagine for the kids to take over that without mom or dad telling them, "Well, this is what this means. This is how I have this organized," and you don't have the 25 years of expertise or experience that I have. It's extremely difficult to go through that. So at least on one level, this is one of the reasons why it's so important to get involved, and explain to the parents why it's important to get involved, is that you have to have an understanding of how things are set up and why they're set up. Secondly, I would encourage at some point to consolidate. Okay, I understand what happened after the 1929 crash. I understand that banks closed. The financial system is set up differently now. Okay, there are protections in place that are set up differently now. And particularly as we get closer to the end of our life, or we get to an older age, it's probably important to have less things to keep track of, less things for the kids to try to sort through after you're gone. And so, well, I would strongly suggest that we consolidate and really pick a strategy that's going to be, less involved. And again, to be clear, for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not going to tell you where to put your money. I will tell you where not to put your money sometimes if I think there's a scam out there, or if I think somebody's not doing the right thing for my friends and family and clients. I might tell you I'm suspicious of this, but I'm not going to tell you how to invest. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't get any financial benefit from telling you how to invest. But I do believe that for your best interest and everybody's best interest, and especially your kids' best interest, it's important to consolidate so we have clear, maybe we have 4 or 5 different accounts or 6 accounts that we keep track of. And maybe even we have an advisor, outside advisor that, keeps track of that for us, that we trust, and that has, one of the things I caution people when it comes to an outside advisor, you really want to make sure that you know what they have to offer. Because if they only offer one type of financial product, let's say they only offer annuities, or they only offer life insurance products or things like that, boy, that seems problematic to me, because they don't have anything to offer you. Where they can help you get organized, but they don't have anything to offer you beyond that. So of course, everybody needs that, because that's the only thing they have to sell. So I would strongly recommend, if you are going to consolidate with a financial advisor, you use one that has a broad scope of, they can do annuities, they can do life insurance, they can do mutual funds, they can do individual stocks, they can do money market accounts, they can do those things. Or some people just say, hey, I'm going to put it all at the bank at this point. I'm 90 years old. I'm going to, get out of the investment game. I'm not an investment advisor. I can't advise you as to whether or not that's a good idea or not. What I am going to say is, having fewer accounts to keep track of is going to be better for you, and definitely better for the people that you're expecting to take over on your disability, on your illness, or certainly on your death, right? So that's something that it's really important. And that's a big change in culture, because I think it wasn't that long ago at all that the advice was, put your money at many different banks, okay? We talk about more sophisticated sales and scams, okay? So I don't want to call every sales technique a scam. It's not. That's not fair. But people are much more sophisticated at trying to convince people to spend their money or move their money, or all of those things. And so we have to be a little bit, I don't want to say suspicious. Suspicious is the wrong word. We have to do our due diligence. We have to ask the right questions. We have to make sure that we're getting advice. It's not a bad idea. One of the things that we do for folks all the time, even though we're not a financial advisor, and I get no financial benefit from providing from where you put your money, I'm more than happy to discuss with you some of the things that we think. I've been working with financial products. I am familiar and comfortable with almost every financial product out there, and I can give advice about it. But I give advice as a non-salesperson, as somebody that doesn't sell that, doesn't get any benefit from it, doesn't get any kickback from it, doesn't get any commission from it. So it's kind of an outsider. And I'm happy to do that for my clients, to say, okay, if your guy is saying that we got to put everything into a variable annuity, and you're 85 years old, and they want you to start a new variable annuity, boy, I'm gonna, and it's everything, not just 10% or 20%, but they want you to put 90% of your savings in that. I'm gonna say, well, I think we should look at other options there. That I think that's very risky at that point. And so there's lots of sophisticated sales techniques, and of course, there are actual scams out there. The ones that I can't even give the benefit of the doubt that it's clearly a scam. We're dealing with this all of the time. So when we do estate planning, and we do a new will or a trust for somebody, and when we do that, we have to prepare a new deed for their house. That's part of the process. I know that, don't be scared by that. That's just a normal part of the process, to prepare a new deed for the house, to make sure that the house is going to avoid probate and all of that. And the idea, as soon as that deed gets filed, almost everybody now gets, within a few months afterwards, they'll get this letter in the mail saying, your deed is at risk, and you just send us $85 and we'll make sure that we secure it. Well, that's a bunch of garbage. That's a complete scam. It sounds really scary. And I would hope that if you got that letter, you'd call us and we'd say, no, we have the deed for you. We've given you the deed. It's all set. You don't need to pay somebody else $85. There's lots of other scare techniques out there. I saw there's one now that I think that they're advertising saying that your property's at risk to scammers that will just sign new deeds and file new deeds and things like that. Even some prominent politicians and prominent like actors and things like that are promoting this thing, which really seems like a big scam to me, where they're saying, oh, you got to pay us a certain amount a month and we'll monitor the county records for you to make sure nobody files a deed on your house. It's definitely not worth, in my view, this is my opinion, it's definitely not worth the money that you're paying for that. And I'm disappointed with the prominent people that are being paid to advertise that, being paid to go on those commercials and things like that. But there's all kinds of scams out there. This is why, and we see this all the time, that scammers, especially on the phone, really try to target older folks. And so this is one of those red flags that, and it's so easy to fall victim to this. It's so easy to fall victim to this. And some of them seem really scary. And the idea is, it's not a bad idea to have the kids kind of look at the checking account and look at the bank account and look at it and say, well, Dad, what's this? What's this? Mom, what's this? What's going on with this? Why are we spending? It seems like there's a monthly charge here. What's this, that we paid for here? And at a minimum, where there's somebody at least looking at the books and kind of a backup. I think that's good for lots of folks, as long as it's somebody you love and you trust. You don't want to put somebody you don't trust where they're overlooking your books. But if it's somebody that you love and you trust, it's not a bad idea to have somebody else look over it and question it, and just say, okay, looks good, great, you're balancing your checkbook, things like that. One of the things that I see all the time that I'm not a big fan of, and that is clients will come in all the time and their kids will come in all the time, and I'll say, well, is Dad still managing his finances? Is Mom still managing his finances? And they say, well, not really. And I said, well, how do you pay the bills? Oh, well, I write out the checks and then I have Dad sign it. I write out the checks and I have Mom sign it. At that point, I think we probably need to take a more active role than that, because if you're doing all of the work, if you're figuring out all of that, having Mom or Dad sign it when they don't even really necessarily have a great understanding of what they're signing, if that's just part of the process and you go over it with them and they fully understand it and they're the ones actually saying which bills to pay and things like that. But if you're deciding what bill to pay and when to pay it and how to pay it and all of that, I think it's time to take that next step. First of all, Mom and Dad trust you enough to do that. We're going to talk about this from the standpoint of how uncomfortable this can be sometimes. And I think that's what is driving this with a lot of families. There's a relatively straightforward ways that we can have set up a legal basis for you to do that without them signing documents that they don't even understand what they're signing, or signing checks as that they didn't really have any involvement in. You're just saying, put your signature on this, and they're not involved in it. They have no decision-making authority. They're just writing out their signature. If it's at that point, my advice is we need to take it to another level. Why do so many people do it? Because they feel uncomfortable. They feel like this is not their role. What I'm telling you is, if it's at that point, this is their role. This is your role, and we should do it formally and legally, and we should make sure everybody understands what this is, the process, because there could come a point where they can't sign their name. And if they're signing their name and not understanding what they're signing, that's not really great anyway. We should just make this a more formal process to say, okay, now Susie's gonna, take over paying the bills and balancing the checkbook, and then, we can have kind of checks and balances in there with the other kids or things like that. I want to talk about changes in the law. So one of the things that we did that it was very, very common in years past is putting kids' names on accounts, or putting kids' names on the deed to the house, or things like that. This is such a bad idea. I understand that's what Grandma did. I understand that's what your parents did, or that's what Aunt Susie did, or whatever. but there's so many more problems and more reasons why that's such a bad idea and can cause all kinds of harm and cause both parties harm. It can cause mom and dad harm, it can cause the kids harm, and it's because of changes in the law, changes in expectations, changes in the way that the government and the prosecutors and the police look at this. Because if we're doing it that way, and you could be held accountable for that. There could be criminal charges if you can't justify everything there. And so there's got to be a more formal process that has the checks and balances. And I don't mean going to court. I'm not a big fan of going to court and getting a court appointing a guardian or a conservator or things like that. There's a process that we can keep things in the family, but do it the right way and not just have it be where, well, I'm adding my daughter's name to the account. I understand most of my clients suggest that that's the right idea because that's what their parents did. That's what their grandparents did. The laws are more complicated when it comes to Medicaid, when it comes to elder abuse, when it comes to banking rules, when it comes to everything else. The people at the bank may even tell you to do that. The people at the title office might tell you to do that. They shouldn't be giving legal advice because it's really, really bad legal advice. Okay, so my tip for this slide is to try to notice changes in their decision making. If all of a sudden, if mom had always kind of balanced her checkbook and all of a sudden it's not balanced, and if mom had always been very meticulous about how she decides to pay her bills or how she's going to spend things or what things she's going to invest in, and all of a sudden she's not making the same decision-making pattern, that she's not balancing her checkbook, she's being a little bit more frivolous with their money, she's dad's paying people that stop by and knock on the door for services that may or may not get performed, and he never would have done that before. These are things that we need to now say, okay, there's something going on here. It's important for us to at least inquire and kind of step up. And I'm a big believer in having people that are trustworthy and loving step up. So let's talk about the process. How do we do this? Well, in my experience, it kind of comes down to two categories: parents that may want your help and parents that resist your help. So parents that may want your help. Many, 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 many times, the parent is more than willing to accept your help if you approach it the right way and aren't mean about it, and you're explain why this is appropriate and important and that you're trustworthy and you have a good relationship and a loving relationship. But it's us. It's us that feel uncomfortable with it. This happens a lot of times. So sometimes when people call our office and when clients come in, we have to ask some uncomfortable questions. We have to ask about family dynamics. We have to ask about finances. Sometimes we have to ask about budgeting and, well, how are you spending your money? I see you got money coming in every month. It seems to be leaving. I don't see the bills here. I have to ask that question. That's an uncomfortable question for me to ask. What I keep telling my team, my staff, is a lot of times that uncomfortability is in our head. It's not in the receiver's head. So I'll ask these questions to my clients, and I'll instruct my team to ask these questions that are important questions for the lawyer to know, for our law office to know, to ask these questions. And 95 times out of 100, it's not uncomfortable for the person, for mom and dad, for our clients. It's not uncomfortable for them. They understand why you're inquiring. They understand that this is about loving and caring and about giving good advice when it comes from us. And so it's in our head. So invariably, when I hire a new staff person and I say, well, these are the questions we have to ask, and I hear them stumbling over it and they are just not doing it or whatever, and I have to sit them down and say, okay, what's going on in your head? Because this is you feeling guilty. This is you feeling uncomfortable and not stepping up, not doing what should be done, needs to be done because of your uncomfortability. It might not even be mom and dad's uncomfortability. Mom and dad may be completely willing to trust you and open, and they want your help. They don't want to be a burden, and you want to help. They want your help, but mom and dad are just like, well, I don't want to be a burden, so I'm not going to ask. And you're like, well, I don't want to be nosy, so I'm not going to ask. Okay, let's stop with that. That's just communication garbage, right? And so sometimes we just got to get out of our head and say, this is what needs to be done. If mom and dad are open to it, this is what needs to be done. We need to step in. We need to look at the checkbook. We need to ask questions about their finances. We need to find out where they're invested, what bank they're at, how things are set up. This is important at this stage in life. And I'll be honest with you, more often than not, it's in that first category. Even with clients that come in and the kids will come in and they'll say, well, my parents are just so private, they'll never want to disclose this information. And then that's not the case at all. The parents actually wanted that help. They just didn't want to ask for help. And so I think so much of the time it falls into that first category of parents that may actually want your help, but they're just don't want to burden you. They don't want to ask for help. And so if you offered, they'd be more than willing to let you dive into that. It's just so difficult sometimes because we're in our head. And it was like when I talked about earlier about me and my brother saying, you know, we may have a time where we've got to talk to dad about not driving. Well, when the time came, because that time actually has come, my dad doesn't drive anymore. When that time came, it was his idea. He's the one that said, you know, I don't think I should drive anymore. And so my brother and I looked at each other and we're like, yeah, that's probably right. And so the idea is it's often something we build up in our own head and our own emotions. And so, you know, there's importance. So now what if you've tried and there's resistance and they're saying, I got it all under control, everything's fine, I don't need your help. Okay, there's resistance to that. Well, unless you're an only child, so if you're an only child, I think that sometimes that there are reasons where you have to go and say, well, mom, this is something that I'm uncomfortable. I'm having trouble sleeping at night because I need to know that you're safe and that you're protected, and really make that case and really explain, not just start picking up the checkbook and looking at it and then start asking accusatory questions, but explain. We're going to talk about if somebody has dementia or those types of things in a second, but you know, give some explanation. The other thing, if it's more than just the only child, what is really, really, really helpful if all the kids are of like mind, if you can come to a meeting of the minds. One of the things that we do in our office is we often will have a family meeting because there's so much information out from not great sources. We've been doing this, we've been helping families for a very long time, and we've had a lot of success at having these family meetings and having everybody kind of come to an understanding as to what we should be looking at, who should be doing it, and all of that. But the problem is, without that family meeting, without that communication, it's something we do as part of our practice, then, you know, one kid's getting advice from their spouse or their in-laws, another kid's getting advice from their barber or their hairdresser, another kid's getting advice from, you know, and there's so much different advice. I was about to say bad advice, but I probably shouldn't say that. But there's so much different advice and not thorough and not informed advice. You know, one of the things that I've learned over the years is if somebody's been doing something for 25 years and they've been doing it successfully, we should probably put their advice at a higher level than somebody that Aunt Susie went through this, because Aunt Susie's circumstances isn't going to be the same as yours. So if you're taking advice because your neighbor's Aunt Susie went through this, well, your neighbor might actually not have known all the things regarding Aunt Susie. They may have just known a part of it. Aunt Susie might have done it completely wrong and just gotten away with it. Sometimes people come in and they'll tell me stuff that, you know, their Aunt Susie did, and I was like, well, Aunt Susie committed fraud there, and that broke the law, and that's a felony. She may have gotten away, and I may not say that out loud, but some of the things that people tell me, they're like, well, we're just going to do it this way because Aunt Susie did it this way. And like, oh, I'm really hoping Aunt Susie didn't do it that way because that's a felony, you know? And so the idea is it's helpful to have everybody in one place with a reliable source that we can kind of go through and have everybody understand the importance of this and why it's necessary, and have the checks and balances and the communication and things like that. So I find it very important. So then there's, of course, what if mom and dad are starting to show signs of memory loss or dementia? And there's different types of dementia. I'm not sure about these percentages. This was put out by the Alzheimer's Association, and it seems to be a little bit over, high on Alzheimer's and not on these other ones. So I don't know what their source is for this, is from the Alzheimer's Association, so they have a reason to suggest that it was, a higher percentage. Certainly lots of folks have Alzheimer's. A huge increase in Alzheimer's diagnoses over the last, several decades. But, there's different types of dementia, and so how do we deal with that? If it's, hopefully we get in prior to someone getting so far along that they aren't able to make any decisions. If they can't recognize their family, if they don't know where they are or where they live or who you are, then we probably have to go to court. Then that's the only time that we probably actually have to go into court. If they don't have any legal documents, hopefully they have old legal documents and maybe we can use those. But if they don't have any legal documents at that point, if they don't know who you are, we probably have to go into court. But ideally, they've come in where they still have some ability to make their own decisions and set this up ahead of time. And so at that point, there's a point at which if somebody has dementia and they don't have what they call executive decision making, with all of these dementia, there is a one of the symptoms, and it's it's included in all of the dementias, is a lack of executive decision making. In other words, they're not making good decisions anymore. And so at some point, the family just has to step in and take over. If someone's not making good decisions anymore, yes, of course we want to protect their pride. Of course we want to do this as gently as possible. But do you think we're really doing anybody a favor by not stepping in when somebody is putting themselves in danger, when they're making bad decisions, when they're losing their money putting their money at risk and things like that? And so there is a time where, and again, not every family will accept my advice, but there is a time with some families that I say, I really want to involve mom and dad, but there's a time in some families where dementia has gotten to the point where they're, the mom or dad is refusing to participate or can't participate because they don't have the mental capacity to do that. We just have to step in and take over. Somebody has to step up, and it's important. And if they don't, it's only going to get worse. And the sooner we address this, the more we can provide some protections and make sure and avoid it getting worse. And this happens all the time. Probably a very large percentage of my clients come in crisis. It's already too far along. It's already crisis. I can help you in that situation. I absolutely can help you in that situation. I'm just encouraging people to come in before it's an absolute fall off the cliff crisis. A lot of people, they don't. A lot of families, they because of guilt, because of uncomfortability, because of all of this, they see it. They come home at Christmas, they come home at Thanksgiving, and they see it, and they see the bills piling up, and they get, whatever, or they see that the stove gets left on, or whatever it is, and they just like, this is uncomfortable, so I don't want to step in. And then it ends up in crisis. Well, I can help in crisis. It costs more, I'm going to tell you that. If it gets to where it's a crisis, my legal fees are going to be higher, but it's more, my legal fees are the least of the concerns at that point. My legal fees are honestly the least of the concerns. In that situation, it's the least expensive option. Me helping is the least expensive option because every other option is going to be significantly more expensive than. But obviously, not only from the standpoint of legal fees, but everything else, it's so much better if we can try to get ahead of this before it gets to that falling off the cliff, before it gets to that crisis. But we can still help in crisis. We can still protect assets. We can still qualify for programs. We can still give advice about how to get care, all of these things. All right. So this all leads up to one important thing. What do we do? What's the thing that we absolutely have? And this is not the end of the story. This is the beginning of the story. So when I say you have to have these things, sometimes people look at this and they say, okay, well, I've got these things, so that's the end of the question. That's the end of the story. I've done my legal work. No, this is the beginning. Now you need to use these documents, and you need advice on using these documents. You need to have a process for making sure we're moving forward in the right process. That's what we do. The documents are the least, they're crucial. They're very important that we have the legal authority to have the family do what needs to be done and keep it in the family and stay out of court and all of these things. But that's not the end of it. That's the beginning. Now you need advice on how to use these, how to deal with the bank, how to deal with the doctors, how to deal with the caregivers, how to deal with the care situations, how to protect assets, how to qualify for government benefits, how to qualify for veterans benefits, how to qualify for Medicaid benefits. That's what the real thing is. And so sometimes people think going to a lawyer, it's just to sign a bunch of documents. No, well, I mean, unfortunately, with a lot of lawyers, that is the case. That's not what we do, okay? Yes, we need to have these documents. Now, our documents are also a little bit different. I meant to put a tip on this slide and I forgot to put the tip. The tip is don't use form documents. Don't use fill in the blank documents. And if you feel like your lawyer gave you fill in the blank documents, come to a different lawyer, come to us, because there are lawyers out there that are using fill in the blank documents, and that is not what we need. That is not effective. So what's the minimum that we need? We need a financial power of attorney. So we need somebody that's going to be able to go to the bank. We need somebody that's going to be able to go to the post office. We're going to need somebody that's going to be able to deal with the IRS, somebody that's going to be able to deal with the pension company. We need a healthcare proxy, sometimes called a living will. Sometimes it's a healthcare proxy is called a healthcare power of attorney. Sometimes it's called a patient advocate. But we need, if mom or dad's not able to make healthcare decisions or life support decisions, we need somebody else that's going to do that, so we don't end up having to go to a court and have a judge appoint somebody to decide that. One of the things that I strongly believe that is in this situation where the kids need to be involved in parents' lives during lifetime is a trust. A lot of people look at a trust and a will as an after death kind of a thing. Well, a will is an after death kind of a thing, but a trust covers the after death part of it, but it also makes it life a whole lot easier if kids have to step in and be involved in parents' lives, involved in parents' finances during their lifetime. So the trust is, most people think of a trust as, hey, that avoids probate. True. If we have assets in the trust, it's going to avoid probate. But the idea is that's what I don't think is I don't think that's the biggest benefit of the trust. I think it's going to help manage the assets, manage the finances, manage the house, manage the decisions, and make it so much easier for the kids than just using a power of attorney. A trust often is going to be much easier to use for the children than a power of attorney. I have occasionally gotten questions from people saying, well, my mom had a trust and the bank wouldn't accept it, and you know, I still had a hard time, and they put me through the ringer and all of that. I have to be polite here. My advice is that either you didn't, the lawyer that put it together didn't provide the level of service that we provide, or you didn't call the lawyer. So maybe the lawyer was great and does, you know, and does that follow through and is available for when there's a problem and is available to help you, you know, negotiate and maneuver through the bank system and through the, you know, whatever. Maybe the lawyer is available for that. A lot of lawyers aren't. I'll be honest with you. A lot of lawyers aren't. They prepare the documents, they give you the documents, and they say, good luck to you. That's not what we do. So the second part of it is, though, maybe you didn't call. Maybe you didn't ask for the lawyer's help. And so, yeah, sometimes legal documents require a lawyer to help make them work properly. You know, I compare legal documents to tools. Well, if I gave you, you know, a very sophisticated tool without any instructions, is that good enough? You know, maybe you could figure it out. Some people are going to figure it out, but for a lot of folks, giving you a very sophisticated tool without any instructions and without any training, without any help, without any follow through, without any follow up, that could be dangerous, frankly. And a lot of this can be dangerous without that. And that's what the value of our services are, is that we're going to be here for the follow up. We're going to be here when you need to use the documents, not just when we're preparing the documents. And then the big thing, and something that people don't understand a lot, is asset protection. Why do we want to protect assets? Well, God forbid we need 24-hour care. That gets very expensive. We need nursing home care. We need home care, things like that. Well, often, there's ways that we can protect assets and qualify for benefits without having to spend down those assets, without losing those assets. Okay, so that's a big part of this. And mom and dad probably may or may not have heard of this. You know, their grandparents didn't have this, but a nursing home back in 1980 cost $1,500. Okay, now it costs $12,000 a month for some nursing homes. There's one in Flint that costs $14,000 a month. And so, you know, the idea is, asset protection is a much bigger deal. Why it's important that we look at, are we going to be able to qualify for veterans benefits, Medicare benefits, Medicaid benefits, other benefits that are out there. And that's a big part of what we do. All right, so let's see. I'm sure that some folks have some questions. If you have an opportunity, if you have a burning question, you want to type it into the question box there, we can answer that now. But Savannah's going to come on in a second, and she's going to give you some instructions about how to get a one-on-one question. We actually have a process for you to contact us, kind of interview us, get more information about us, and Savannah's going to come on and tell you about that.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks everyone else for joining us today. As Bob mentioned, we do have an easy way for you to connect with our team. I've actually put both of those ways, we have two easy ways, and I put them in the chat now. The first, of course, is you can call. Our phone number is 810-694-9000. We're available from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're more than happy to answer your call. If you don't want to call now, and you want to schedule a time for our team to contact you, I've also put a link in the chat. When you click the link, it will take you to a calendar. You'll be able to choose a day and a time when a member of our team can give you a call. So again, you can call us at 810-694-9000, or you can click the link. I'm also sending an email. You should have that any minute. That email will also have the link there for you to give us a call. And then tomorrow, I'll send the replay of today's presentation. So that will be in your email tomorrow. Thanks again for joining today. We look forward to seeing you next week.